Today we're going to replace the speedometer pinion seal in a 1981 280ZX. There's a small transmission oil leak that I'm getting between the seal and the speedometer cable, and there are some O-rings there that you can just swap out, but we're going to replace the entire pinion assembly today because I was able to get a brand new OEM one shipped to me for about $35, and it's easier just to replace the whole thing than to get at especially the inner O-ring inside the pinion assembly without possibly damaging the assembly or damaging the O-ring as you're installing it or making mistakes. The speedometer cable is attached to the transmission, and you have to get at it. Easiest is to just go through the back of the car and put the car up on ramps on the rear like I'm doing right here. I prefer ramps over jack stands if I don't have to take the tires off. It's just much easier to go up and down. So I've got some ramps here. We're going to go underneath the bottom and I'll show you what we're doing. And by the way, you want the rear lifted up, not the front, because with the rear lifted up, when we take out the pinion, we won't lose very much transmission oil out the hole on the side of the transmission. If you're level or you raise the front, then you're going to lose more oil that way. So here's what we're looking at underneath the car on the passenger side of the transmission. So we're going to use a 10mm socket to get off that one hex nut that you can see. And there's a little metal tab that it is holding it's holding onto right here, and that's going to come off also. So just make sure that you don't lose that tab. You're going to need it. It holds the pinion in the proper position when it's reattached. So we're going to just take a socket wrench to that and take that one off first. All right, so I've loosened it up. I'm just going to finish by hand, but you can see under here there's this little washer and this other metal tab that are both going to come off when I take off the rest of this. Here, we're just going to try to keep all that stuff together. Good, and we have everything right here. We'll just set that aside. All right, so here's a speedometer cable. It's connected by this kind of knurled knob right here, and usually it's too tight just to do by hand. So we're going to use some vice grip pliers to just grab this and just turn it a little bit and loosen it up, and then we'll be able to get the rest done by hand. And when we'll pull it out, I'll show what it looks like inside. This is the speedometer cable, and after you've pulled it off the transmission, I don't know if you can tell from here, but there is some transmission oil in there. It kind of dripped out when I pulled this out, which tells me there was definitely a leak. There's not supposed to be transmission oil going up your speedometer cable. Back underneath the car, all we need to do is grab this pinion assembly and pull it straight out. There's nothing holding it in anymore except for maybe just a little bit of tension. If it doesn't come out easy, you can just grab the ends of it with some needle nose pliers and pull it, but it should come straight out right now. All right, we pulled the old one just straight out this way, and here we can see, by the way, I had replaced this outer ring already because it's really easy to replace, and it didn't solve my leak. So the leak must be on the one on the inside. At any rate, it was very easy to get a brand new one, official OEM part. So we're going to install this one. Just make sure that when you order one, that you get one that has the correct number of teeth, which is designated by also the color of it for your particular transmission and vehicle. It's just, I find it really nice that for a 40-year-old car, you can still get this piece brand new from Nissan. It's not like some new old stock that somebody's charging you an arm and a leg for. I just got to find the right site, and I got it for like $35 shipped to me. Now, before we put the new pinion assembly in there, it is useful just to wipe around the inside of this shaft with a rag or a cloth, just to make sure that there isn't any sediment or like something foreign in there that is, causing the leak or causing the seal to be bad. And also just make sure you don't feel like a groove that's been made by some piece of sediment in the past, in which case you're going to continue to have a leak and have to seal it up another way. Well, let's just look how this works. It's pretty straightforward. So this part here goes on the inside, and this is what the transmission will turn when the car moves. And you can see when it turns this shaft on the inside. You can see that there's another O-ring in there, which is probably why this one is leaking. I just don't feel like taking this thing apart with a pick and a punch and having a table vise. I don't even have all those things, so it was easier for me just to replace the whole pinion. And you'll see that the end of the speedometer cable here just sticks in the other end of that, and there's a little tab on the end of this cable which gets grabbed by that pinion gear, and then when this cable spins here, it makes your speedometer turn. If you have a leak coming up here, sometimes the transmission oil can go all the way up to your speedometer head and cause your speedometer head to do some funky things like skip around and jump around because there'll be transmission oil up in the head where it's not supposed to be. Before we even put this thing back in the car, I just rub a little bit of oil around that outer O-ring and went ahead and wrapped the Teflon around the threading. It's just much easier to do with the part sitting here instead of when it's already shoved in the shaft and you're like lying on your back trying to get that piece of Teflon around it. So much easier to do before you put it back in the car. The orientation of this thing inside the shaft is going to matter. You'll notice that on the pinion assembly, there is one part that is flat with that little indentation. That part has to go exactly where that screw and tab were from before that we took out of the car. Okay, we have the bolt with that tab holding the new pinion assembly in place. Then we just gotta insert the speedometer cable, and the only tricky part here is just getting that tab on the end of the speedometer cable to line up with the little notch inside that inner shaft there. Just might have to twist one by hand to get them to line up easily, and then just stick it in there and tighten this down, and then should be good to go. The good news is that this is one of those leaks where if you put the car down back level, then just wait a while, and if there's a leak, you'll see it. You don't even have to drive the car to see it, because when the transmission's level, if there's a leak, it's going to start coming out. Luckily, my leak was slow, so I didn't lose too much fluid. But now we have just successfully done this speedometer pinion replacement in our 280ZX.